Hey everybody, today we're talking about the art of adaptation and man, the physical, mental, emotional capacity. Um this is a pretty in-depth thought, concept, idea. So you're not going to get it probably the first time you watch this presentation. You're probably going to have to watch this several times to truly understand it. This is really understanding um, how to take somebody and push them into a new version of themselves. So they've shown up to the gym, they have certain limitations, they have certain performance abilities already acquired, and now you're going to ask of them to do more. And how do you take what they have and get them to do more? And so it's a pretty tricky thing to really figure out. There's a lot of nuance in this. It takes a lot of time to really make the right observations and get the right data to make the right decisions that's in the benefit of the athlete. And so this is kind of in an area of how do I become a successful coach? How do I win? And this is kind of putting all the pieces together for you. So let's get into it. Okay, capacity. Capacity is basically how big is your bucket and how full is it. So if you think of your body having the limitation, the limits of your body is literally your body. You cannot acquire more like outside of your body. You have a capacity, you have a physical capacity. How strong am I? You have a mental capacity with your brain of how is my brain wired to think and operate? And you have an emotional capacity of how do I respond or react to the neurotransmitters that are being released, and how does that affect me? And so these are capacities. I just have random numbers out there to just give you an idea of it's like how full are you? And the idea of capacity is to continue to expand your bucket so that you can fill it up more. So it's not about just filling the bucket. It's also about expanding and making the bucket bigger so that as you fill it up, it doesn't overflow. Because when it overflows, that's when it leads to injury or other issues. So it's kind of like capacity is your ability to be prepared for whatever is going to be demanded of you. And that is kind of the baseline that you're working with. Somebody shows up to class, they only have so much capacity, and you have to work within the boundaries of what they bring to class that day. Okay, physical capacity. There is a lot on this page, and let's just dive into it, I guess. So, body limits of energy production. Basically, what is almost in the sense of what are the limiting factors of my physical self to be able to produce energy? So you have center of mass. If my center of mass is not moving in an efficient pathway, it's going to limit my ability to produce energy. So I need to know how to move my center of mass appropriately. There's body ratio. Arm length, size of feet, bone density, all these things will actually determine also how efficiently you move your center of mass and what you're better at. People with longer arms tend to be better at bars. People with smaller feet tend to be better at tumbling, is what it seems to be. There's hip size, and this goes to all sports, right? Endurance sports, athletes who have bigger lungs, let's say, or hearts that can absorb or produce more oxygen, pump it through the body, whatever those types of differences are. Usually basketball players are naturally have to be taller, even if their skill set is not that good. Just being tall gives them an advantage. So understanding what your body limitations are just on the physical sense will actually hinder or help your energy production. Fast twitch versus slow twitch muscles. This gets really deep into science, but basically you're either going to move slow or you're going to move fast based off of how you've how many muscle fibers you have that are basically fast or slow twitch. You can train these, like let's just say half your body's fast twitch and half your body's slow twitch. If you put all your time into developing your slow twitch muscles, then your fast twitch muscles are not going to actually work as fast. So learning to actually train the slow twitch, train the fast twitch depending on what you actually need them for. Inhibitors are in your body to prevent your muscles basically from getting ripped off your bones. So if you're pushing as much weight as you possibly can and it's going to destroy your muscles, your body just instantly relaxes and drops the weight and collapses on itself. That's an inhibitor. It's preventing you from damaging yourself. It's the same thing as if you're sliding out into your splits and you feel lots of pain. It's saying, no, don't slide out any further because your splits are going to rip your muscles off your legs. It's not exactly true. It's just a safety mechanism. And athletes that are higher performing, their inhibitors kick in later, but they have to prepare their body to be able to handle the forces. Going into the categories of energy, you basically have neurological engagement and physiological engagement. Neurological engagement is how does my brain, my central nervous system engage with my muscles? And physiological engagement is how do my muscles engage with basically my skeleton or the world around me. Neurological engagement is like doing a 1 rep max. It's more about your nervous system firing really well all at the same time to move a very heavy load, versus physiological engagement is like how well are my muscles prepared to take the wear and tear on my body that it's going to need to do something. So being able to do 100 push-ups in a row or 100 squats in a row without resting, like what is the physical capacity, the physical ability that my muscles actually have to handle the constant wear and tear that's going on. Energy output, this is basically understanding that the output of energy, you're trying to produce energy, but then how it is translated into the output and used is based off of these things. So like alignments basically, is there a clean straight line? Because energy likes to travel in a straight line. So is there a clean line in your body that energy can travel through? If you have a lot of looseness or things are not stacked, bones are not stacked on top of each other, muscles are not in alignment, then you're going to have a loss of energy. Tension is basically two pulling forces, and energy travels through objects that are more tense. So think about if you have a string and you attach it to a wall and you're holding one end. If it's loose and you flick it, the energy doesn't really travel through it the same way as quickly as it goes to the wall and comes back. But if you pull it taut and you flick it, that energy will go into the wall and bounce back. You can see that energy wave kind of move right back to your hand. So the more tension it has, the better the energy travels. Force is your ability to move the center of mass. Speed is how fast you rotate, or rotation. So basically just spinning. It's how fast can something spin. It doesn't actually have a direction. Acceleration has a direction. Velocity has a direction. But speed is just rotational in place. There's no direction. Force and speed equal power. So it's kind of a balance. It's like how much of a load can I move once? And then how fast and quickly can I move under no load? Put those two things together, and that's really what power is. So that's what you're trying to develop, both is force and speed. Direction of energy, it's concentric produces the energy, so it's the shortening of the muscles. Eccentric actually absorbs the energy, and isometric is kind of holding the energy. And so there's a conversion process that happens. It's kind of like a car, but essentially you go eccentric, isometric, concentric, and it's converting the energy. So I'm absorbing the energy, I'm holding it, and then I'm adding it to the concentric motion. Think if you're going to do a bunch of jumps in a row, or let's just say you're doing a bench press and you're lowering the weight down to your chest, you're eccentrically lowering, and then you have to stop at some point and push it back up. Well, your ability to convert the energy from the drop to the push actually will determine your output of energy, and also the direction. And so being able to understand how those three movements work together. Recovery is basically what type of workout are you doing and what type of recovery is needed. So like endurance, for instance, is you're trying to recover in the process. Essentially, you're going to go, I'm going to run as long as I possibly can, but I'm not going to run so fast that I can't also recover. So endurance running, think 50 mile runs. There's no rest going on, so they're running for 50 miles. So they have to run at a pace that their body can maintain for that period of time. And a 50-mile run probably goes for a pretty long time. So if you think about the amount of rest that you're getting, it's very limited. Now, from race to race or run to run, you're probably going to have a pretty good recovery time in between those. But during the process, there isn't a lot of rest. A sprint has more rest because a sprint doesn't last as long. So it's like using all your energy, it's gone, and then you've got to rest. And you're not going to be able to sprint the same way until you take that rest. Volume is more about a period of time and then how much you get in that period of time. So you can't really put as much volume in 1 minute as you can in 1 hour or in 1 day. So volume is about time and how much you're going to put in during that time. So volume is very similar to endurance, but the difference with volume is that you're wanting to increase the load, rest, and then do it again. And you're trying to create these mini cycles so that you can increase the load, take a rest, increase the load, take a rest, and just keep the volume going. 1 rep max is about not resting, because you only do it once basically, and then you're done, and you come back the next day. So like the next day is a rest, or the next 2 days. 1 rep max is not usually about it's not like a volume exercise where you try to do the most you possibly can in a day. But the recovery is what is the rest period between the workout, and that rest period is important. Energy converted. So we've talked about some of this. I take my energy, I'm putting it into the output. So now I'm going to have some energy going into a surface or something like that. And it's going to be converted, and it's going to look like linear momentum, angular momentum, rotational inertia, centripetal force, centripetal acceleration, tangential acceleration. What am I doing with that energy, and how is it interacting with the world around me? That's what energy converted is. The bottom 3 are more about bars and understanding how bars works. We haven't really talked about that, but just introducing those terms. That we have talked about linear, angular, and rotational, so you should understand that. Energy potential, past, present, future. So this is asking the question, okay, in the past, how much energy have you been able to produce? Currently, what are you able to produce? And then what are we trying to produce? So if in the current situation you're not producing as much as you did in the past, then there's some sort of decline, and you want to know why. Can I not produce as much today as I did in the past? If I'm producing as much as I need for the future, then I need to adjust my workout. If I'm not, then I need to do something to my workout so I can get to where I need to be in the future. So the question is, what is your physical capacity? Everybody's is different. It's a lot of components to have to figure out. So understanding you're not going to look at every single person and try to figure out all these pieces and then remember it, because coaching is more about simple keywords. You cannot remember all this stuff for every single person. It is relational, so you can build a relationship and start to unravel these components for your students. But if you have turnover in your students, you only work with them once a week and then they leave after a month. This is not what you're going to be doing in the recreational. This is more competitive. This is more a client that is invested in the program. And then over time, like years, you start to understand this about the athlete. All right, mental capacity. So this is the brain's limits of thinking. So the limits are like, what are your axons doing, your dendrites, the myelin, the proximity of your neurons to one another. Axons kind of deliver information to the dendrites, which receive. Myelin is a coating or fatty coating basically around the connection of the neuron, which allows the signal to get transmitted more efficiently. So the more your brain has myelin in it, then it's able to do a process better. Think if you're learning to play music, when you first start, you don't do it so well, but as time goes on, you don't have to think and things just happen naturally. That's because of myelin. So what we consider talent is actually more myelination. And if you just do the things that your brain is myelinated in, you're going to do them easier and better than the people around you. So that's what that is. Proximity is basically saying, how close is one idea to another so that my brain can correlate or find new ideas? Because there isn't when you think of understanding a new idea, there isn't anything in your brain that says this is how we understand new ideas, as much as it has to go find all the different connections to create the new idea inside your mind before it can create a direct pathway to it. Categories of thinking. So you got a spectrum, a correlation, and a hierarchy. Spectrum is basically saying like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? There's a we know they're numbers, but there's a spectrum of numbers, and it's one thought of, okay, there's numbers. We're not talking colors, we're not talking shapes, just numbers. Correlation is taking multiple spectrums and then finding how they're associated. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, E. Correlation would be 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D. Hierarchy is placing value on those correlations. So you might say, well, 4D is more important than 1A, and 3C is more important than 5E. You might say 5A is better than 5D. So it's just how the pieces come together, and you may not be able to understand the practicality, so let's make this application a little bit more clear. If you're baking a cake, the ratio of how you add the ingredients, so the ratio is a spectrum, okay? Tablespoon, teaspoon, cup. So the measurement is a spectrum, and then you're putting foods into it. And so you have sweet to bitter to salty, right? You have different flavors, and the ratio that you use in relationship to the measuring cups to the ingredients will determine the outcome. And so if you bake a cake and you put in too much salt, it's not going to taste good. Well, most people in the hierarchy value system would say a salty cake is not a delicious cake. So that's going to be lower than, so if you put too much salt in the ingredient, those correlations would make it lower than the ones that are the cakes that are sweeter. But if you make a cake too sweet, people don't like it either. So if you add too much sugar, so you have the measurement and you have the sugar, you add too much, so you're making a correlation, then the hierarchy is also bad. So too much sugar is also bad in a cake. Most people don't like overly sweet cakes. So now you have a hierarchy. So how you combine and then what the result is, those are the things you have to answer. Do I like the result? No. Change the hierarchy. Do I like the result? No. Change the hierarchy. Recovery this is more mental recovery. So basically your brain has to encode the information that it's learning. It consolidates it, and then its ability to recall. So when you're teaching somebody something new, their ability to recall is going to determine if they actually learned anything. So you can't just say, well, I told you the information, you should know it. The question is, can they recall it? If they cannot recall, then they don't actually know anything. And so that's the first step really to how am I going to start my day and what am I going to teach my students? Well, find out what they can recall. Thinking converted. So this is the cognitive stage. It's all about visuals. So I'm thinking, I have thoughts going inside my brain, but what should I be thinking about? Well, it's really about your ability to create visuals. And then you have an associative stage, which is your proprioception essentially. So it's your ability to know where you are in the space around you. So I have my visuals. Now, where am I in relationship to the space around me? And how do those visuals operate? Then I have the autonomous stage, and that's really more about without thinking. And so autonomous stage is now taking my mental capacity and kind of converting it into a physical form of what am I going to do with it. But those are just, you can look up those keywords, cognitive, associative, and autonomous, and that's a process of thinking and how it gets converted into your body so that it becomes part of who you are. Direction of thinking. So there's a change that has a physical position by changing the emotional state, or you're trying to change the emotional state by changing the physical position. So the direction of thinking is, where is my thinking trying to take me? So am I trying to physically change something or emotionally change something? But the thinking is actually the connection between the physical and the emotional state. The thinking basically is the pathway. So this makes me feel bad. So what do I need to physically do to change how I feel? The problem with, you could say, and I'm not a psychologist, I don't claim to know all these things, but just throwing a concept from my own experiences, the problem with anxiety is that I would sit in my same position and never physically change anything, so that my mind would just run and cause the anxiety. So then I would feel the emotions. When I started taking my physical self places, going on hikes, going to the movies by myself, but physically change my position, my emotional state changed, because I'm like, wow, this is fun. I'm actually enjoying this. This is great. So changing your physical position can change your emotional state. Changing your emotional state to change your physical position is much more difficult. And this is somebody who's needs to do a standing back tuck on a high beam and they're scared. Well, you can't just make yourself do a standing back tuck to change the fear. You actually have to change the emotional state of how you feel about the standing back tuck on a high beam to get yourself to go. And that takes a lot of self-control. So that's a pretty tough thing depending on the task that you're trying to achieve. Okay, so we have thinking. Again, we got connect the physical to the emotional. We have efficiency, time management, attaching value, results. So that's really what we're going for, is connecting the physical to the emotional. How efficient are we actually at thinking? What's the time management side of it? Because if our mental state is slow, then we're not going to be achieving as much and it's going to take us longer. We want to be able to attach values to our thinking to know what result we really want. And so when we attach values, we can measure the result to say if the measurement was good or bad. The output of thinking is really asking questions. It's understanding the rhythm. It's being able to put forth max effort. It's learning how to persevere. It's having self-respect. And so by thinking, you're going to want to ask questions. By thinking, you're going to be in better sync or rhythm with the surface or your own body. When you have thinking moving the emotional and physical state, you're going to be putting forth more max effort. So you're going to be closer to that max effort. When your thinking is appropriate and your mental state is in like a winning mindset, then you're going to persevere because you'll be connecting those emotional and physical self. And then you'll also have that self-respect, self-esteem. The potential of thinking is, how's my brain wired from past experiences? In the present state, is my brain wired appropriately, or do I need to change something? And then in the future state, how do I need to change my mental capacity to be able to think about things differently so that I can actually achieve them? And the future side of thinking is really hard for people because it's like walking into the unknown. And so understanding how to think about the future is probably one of the more difficult challenges, because in the present state, most people are wired to think based off of their past experiences, and they're not really ready to change how they think about something. And so in the present state, it gets really tricky to say, hey, you need to change how you're thinking about this for the future. And that's a really hard conversation, difficult conversation to have, because it seems like there's a lot of convincing that needs to happen, and people generally do not seem to be receptive. So that's where I find a big struggle happening there, is getting people to change their mindset for the future. So emotional capacity. So we got emotional limits. So we have basically, there's more, but they're neurotransmitters: endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. These are the endorphins that are released when they feel stress, or they achieve goals, or they have a feeling of importance, or you want to feel connected. These are the feelings that we're chasing after usually, and the stress is good stress. So you're going running for a really long time, endorphins are released. You achieved a goal, you get a dopamine release. You're feeling important, serotonin release, and then you're feeling connected to people. You're gonna get an oxytocin release. And so I call these hits, like we're chasing hits. We're trying to get these hits, and then kind of those feelings that we get from those neurotransmitter releases feel good, and we oftentimes do things to stay in that state of feeling good. So categories of emotions: you have happy, sad, fear, disgust, anger, surprise. You're basically need to understand what state do you want to be in, right? Do you want to be in a state of fear, a state of sadness, a state of disgust, a state of anger, a state of surprise? Because understanding what state you're wanting to be in is going to determine what emotions you're going to want to feel. It's going to determine how do you need to think about this, and what physical state do I need to have or be in to achieve the emotion I want. So we're just trying to align all the pieces. You're trying to align your physical self with your mental self, with your emotional self. You're using the mental self to connect the emotional and physical. Recovery. So let's just say your emotions are getting out of hand and you are losing control and you're frustrated and mad and you feel just negative thoughts. You've got a loser's mindset, essentially. How are you going to recover emotionally? Well, breathing is one exercise. To take slow breaths and really try to be back in the moment and count your breaths, but recentering and focusing yourself on yourself, not on your actions. So breathing, meditation, sitting in a calm state and trying to calm everything down and just clear yourself of those thoughts and not attach yourself to those actions that caused the emotional loss outburst. Visualization. You're struggling with something, well, visualize it. If you can't visualize it, then of course you're going to struggle with it. So visualization is a way to overcome, the I don't knows and the I don't understands, and I'm frustrated and I'm just shutting down and I'm, kind of tail spinning. It's like, whoa, slow down. Like, can you even close your eyes and visualize the skill? And if they say no, then that's an exercise that needs to happen. Probably not in that moment, but it's something that they need to do to help recover from the experience. Time. Just walk away, breathe, take some time and go away from it and give yourself some space. It's a great way to recover. Reset yourself. It's kind of like time in the sense of distancing yourself. It's kind of reset is kind of like you press a button, you just go, I'm going to turn myself off. I'm going to turn myself back on again and just reset myself. I'm coming back in with a fresh mind and I'm just starting over. That's it. Emotions converted. So you take your emotions and you apply them to the world around you. You're either going to create belief or doubt. So understanding that my emotions are going to create belief or doubt, then I need to have emotions that build into my belief system, not emotions that build into my doubts. Doubt's just going to tear you down. Now, I'm not saying you want to believe things that are wrong, but you should be pushing into the belief system that you're pursuing after, especially in gymnastics. Like, I believe in myself, I can do this, I know I'm prepared. Just the confident self-talk, because the amount of energy that it takes to overcome all the struggles and setbacks in gymnastics requires a high level of belief in yourself. Directions of emotions is basically you're going to try to get hits or you're feeding addictions. Addictions usually has a negative term, but if you really think about it, we're all addicted to food. If you stop eating, your stomach's going to get hungry and it's going to go, I want food. And you could basically look at it as an addiction, is that you're hooked on food. There's other addictions, sugar, caffeine, there's television can become an addiction. It's just that predictability of the emotional hit that we're receiving from it and chasing after it. So if you know something makes you feel good, well, if that benefits you, then chase after it. But if you know something makes you feel good and it doesn't benefit you, then you probably shouldn't chase after it, right? So staying up late, eating too much sugar, these things might feel good in the moment, but they might have a negative impact on you when it comes to training, because you're either getting sick or your body's breaking down because it's not getting the nutrients that it needs. And so, sure, it feels good, but it's not helping your future. So you want to chase the hits that help your future. And this is a lot of self-control, self-accountability, self-discipline has to happen here to chase the correct hits. So you got emotions converted again. We got reflection, risk versus rewards, self-regulation, respond. So this is basically just saying, okay, you have emotions, now reflect on them and go, why did I behave this way? Why did my emotions come out this way? And what am I going to do differently? The ability to reflect will help you change how you respond, essentially, to those emotions. Risk versus reward is in the reflection process or in the moment, you got to look at it and go, okay, well, what's the risk versus the reward? Do I want this emotion to come out because is there a reward for it? Or do I want to keep this emotion hidden away or hide, or basically not have this emotion or tell this emotion to go away, because there's a risk that if I allow myself to emotionally react or become uncontrollable or cry or get frustrated, those emotions are going to put me at risk of not achieving my goals today. That's a lot of emotional control, emotional self-discipline, but weighing out the risk versus the reward of those emotions. Self-regulation is just your ability to identify the emotion and then change it. I'm not going to have that emotion right now. To do that, you're going to have to change something about your physical state, or you're going to have to change something in your emotional state, which is, again, using that mental pathway. You've got to have a lot of practice in it to be able to just catch it and change it. Responding is knowing that the emotions are coming out, but instead of reacting to them, you're thinking about those emotions and going, okay, well, how do I want to respond physically to those emotions? Maybe if I'm getting angry, I'm just going to stand still and be very calm and not move my body until the anger disappears. It's going to go away over time. So just taking the control of your physical self so that your emotions do not manifest and are not able to be seen. When your emotions become your output, they lead to your performance. So if you have a great performance, it's because you're putting emotions into your performance that led to that great performance. If you have a bad performance, it's because you're allowing negative emotions to come out and lead into your performance. I like to call it a winning mindset. If you got emotions that are benefiting you, then you basically have a winning mindset because you're tapping into getting those hits. You're achieving those goals. You're feeling the positive stress. You're feeling important. You're getting connection. And you're really connected to the environment around you and how you feel. And you're making sure that how you feel is always positive and building belief systems into the environment around you, which is a winning mindset. Accepting failure. Failing is not a bad thing, and so if you don't like to fail, that's not a problem at all. Failure is actually something that helps you grow as a person. So having negative feelings about failure will actually prevent you from growing and improving and maturing as a person. So allowing those failures to happen actually can help you learn how to process those emotions and get over them faster so that you can actually develop at a quicker pace. Align with direction. What this means is if you need to go in a direction to achieve your goal, you need to align with that direction, even if you do not like it. So if eating healthier is going to help you achieve your goal and you do not like eating healthy food, doesn't matter. You need to align with it. And so you need to emotionally change. You go, oh, I love broccoli. I love celery. I love vegetables. You got to change your mindset, because if you're not aligning with those elements that you need to have to move in that direction, then how are you ever going to get there? Most people say, I want to achieve this goal, but they don't align with the direction that they have to travel in. They want to skip the steps and the processes to achieve the goal, and that just never works out. And then they give up, and then they just pick a different goal. Desire is like, I came into the gym, and what was my vision for the day? What do I desire to achieve? What is the passion, the influence in myself, the internal influence that's going, okay, I'm going to influence myself to achieve these things. I desire to acquire this. And so if you're having a winning mindset, if you have positive emotions, if you're getting the right hits, then the desire to pursue the goal, no matter the struggle, will outweigh the struggle, and you'll overcome those hurdles. It might take time, but the desire is there to keep pushing you forwards. Again, potential is past, present, future. If if in the past you were a very angry person, then in the present you're probably going to still be an angry person. In the future you will too. So in the present you have to have the ability to reflect, respond. You have to be able to catch that anger and stop it, prevent it from manifesting, and in order to change how you handle certain situations in the future. Emotions is just predictability. It's understanding your predictable self and then changing your predictability, which allows growth. Okay, so this is how you put the pieces together. So the recruitment is, how do I take my capacity and then apply it to a scenario? The adaptation formula is basically a spectrum, and it's basically going, okay, there's a low standard and a low expectation. Can you achieve that assignment? Yes? Cool. Then raise the standard, keep the expectation low. Can you achieve that? Yes. And all you're doing is testing a person's capacity with adaptation. You're not actually giving them anything. So then you're switching it. You're doing a low standard and a high expectation, and you're seeing if they have the capacity for it. And then you're trying to do a high standard with a high expectation, seeing if they have the capacity for it. And all you're doing is testing. This constantly switches depending on what the student is trying to achieve. So it's really every moment, every assignment, you're really looking at, okay, what's the capacity the athlete or student has, and then what am I asking them to do? And then are those two things aligning, and am I seeing success? If I'm not seeing success, you change it, okay? If you have a high expectation and a low standard, and the person is doing, let's say, front tucks, and all they're doing is crashing, and they cannot meet the expectation of doing the front tuck, they just crash and die, you need to change it. You need to flip and go, you know what, we're doing a high standard. I need high quality. I'm going to lower the expectation. We're not doing front tucks anymore on an 8-incher. We're going to do dive rolls or something, front flip to seat drop position up a resi mat. And we're going to work on our standard of the punch takeoff position. We're going to work on our standard of the shape changing so that you can be successful, because your capacity is not where it needs to be to do a front tuck on the floor safely, because you keep crashing. And so the adaptation is basically adapting to what their capacity is, changing the assignment so that the success rate stays high and the injury rate stays low. This is a lot. So understanding standards, okay, so how something is measured. A football field can be measured by yards, feet, and inches while achieving the same result, right? So a football field is 100 yards, but that's 300 feet, and I don't know how many inches that is, but that's probably a lot. So the number changes, but the length stays the same, right? 100 is a smaller number than 300, but the football field didn't change because it's 100 and 300. It's 100 yards. It's 300 feet. And so that changes. The measurement stays the same, but the wording changes. And that means that the more accurately you measure something, or the smaller you measure it, then you're going to find errors. Like, you probably could measure a football field by inches and come to the conclusion that it might be a couple inches short or a couple inches long. So it's now longer than 100 yards, or it's shorter than 100 yards. But you'd only come to that conclusion if you measured it by inches. It is how you count that determines how much information needs to be accounted for. So if you're counting by big chunks, then you're going to lose out on the errors in the small chunks. The smaller the measurement, the more accurate the outcome. It was how I got to this understanding is there's a term called fractals, and some video on YouTube that's talking about measuring in fractals, and you can go explore that if you want to. But basically said, if you measure the perimeter of England in a yardstick, you would come to a certain number. And if you measured the perimeter of England in inches, you'd come to a much larger number. And that's simply because the yardstick cannot fit in every crack and crevice as it's measuring at the perimeter, but an inch could. An inch can fit into smaller cracks and crevices. And so because it can fit into smaller cracks and crevices, the perimeter would grow in its length. And so if you could measure the perimeter of England in atoms, then you probably even have a more accurate perimeter of the island. So it's kind of just understanding that how you measure is going to determine the outcome, and the more accurately you measure, the more accurate your outcome is, which means you need to measure in smaller chunks or components. A performance can be measured by skills, movements, or body positions. A back tuck, you could just go, you did a back tuck, you landed on your feet. Or you could say, well, you did a back tuck and land on your feet, but your arm throw wasn't correct. You didn't open your hips, and your head position was wrong. So it's not a back tuck correctly, it's just a back tuck partially correct, right? Or you could look at the body positions even further and be like, your fingers, your head, your whatever was wrong. So there's more. Your landing was in the wrong position. So it's just how are you measuring is going to change the standard. If I'm measuring the success of a skill, then I am measuring one thing. Was the skill successfully completed? If I am measuring the success of a skill and how the skills perform, then I'm measuring multiple things like success, dynamics, rhythm, amplitude. The higher the standard, the more is being measured and held accountable. So, that's a lot of information. Generally, you're just happy in your recreational class if the kid just does the thing you asked of them, but as they progress in level, you want them to do the thing more accurately. Expectation. An expectation is a belief someone will or should achieve something. It is a difficult rating or easy or no. It is a difficulty rating. It's or is, I don't know why it says or, but it's a difficult rating from easy to difficult essentially. So is the task easy to achieve or is it difficult to achieve? And that is in relationship to the athlete's capacity. So am I asking them to do a front tuck and they can already double front? Well, if they can already do a double front tuck and I'm asking them to do a single, then that should be easy. If the kid can't even do a forward roll and you ask them to do a front tuck, then that's going to become difficult. So it's their capacity, their ability in relationship to what you're asking of them is going to determine if it's easy or difficult. It's based on the ease of accomplishment. So you need to walk, there's a door nearby you, and you need to walk through that door. That's pretty easy to do. It's probably a lot harder to get on a rocket and fly to the moon. It's going to take more time, more training. You got a lot. I mean, you're probably not even qualified, so you have to go to school and figure that out. That's much more difficult to achieve. So if something is easy to accomplish, it is a low expectation. If something is difficult to accomplish, it is a high expectation. The difficulty of expectation adjusts as the athlete develops. Handstand and high beam might be difficult when someone is first learning and easy once they gain more experience. The goal is to turn high expectations into low expectations. It is important to understand that the higher the expectation, the lower the standard will become with athletes who are not autonomous. So I'm going to read that. It is important to understand that the higher the expectation, the lower the standard will become with athletes who are not autonomous. This means that if I'm asking somebody to do a front tuck, they're just learned how to do a forward roll and ask me to do a front tuck, they might be able to be successful in the front tuck. Let's just say they huck it and they get really lucky. But the standard is going to be a lot lower. They're not going to have proper arm positions, head positions. They're not going to use the floor appropriately. They might make it, but they're not doing it with a high standard because the standard will break down as you raise the expectation. That's just natural and normal. So it's raise the expectation, watch the standard break down, and then try to raise the standard in that expectation. Autonomous athletes do better maintaining the standard as the expectation increases. This would be like if Simone Biles or Jonathan Horton or, I don't know, Danelle Leyva or Laurie Hernandez or Koei are learning skills, they're probably going to keep the quality somewhat in the skill as they're learning it. They're still going to try to point their toes or straighten their legs or feel things out and do it with some form of accuracy as they're learning. But you're not going to see that as commonly in the lower levels where an athlete doesn't keep the standard through the process no matter what they're learning. So it's just changing your understanding of what you're requiring from who because of what. Elite gymnastics is about competing the highest expectation at the highest standard. And so that's basically all you're just trying to achieve is raise the expectations and raise the standard, and you'll win at the elite world. So summary, so standard is your linear momentum, your angular momentum, rotational inertia, all these things are standards. Expectations would be like connections. I expect you to connect two backhand springs, but as they do that, they're going to lose some linear momentum, angular momentum, rotational inertia, because they've never done it before. Okay, so I raise the expectation, but I lose some standard. Or the expectation is correlations. Can you take the concept of a back handspring and put it over a vault table? And then what does that look like? And then I'm going to see some standard breakdown. Standard and expectation is your performance. So it's the combination. And now you're going out to perform, you're competing, and what does your performance look like? Well, that's going to show from your ability to achieve expectations and maintain standards. It's really important to push the expectations beyond what you're competing. It's really important to hold standards as high as possible on simple things so that it can correlate better when the two converge. Here's a kind of a silly formula thing to look at, just some visualization. So it's going into the recruitment. We got the yes on the left and the no on the right. So you ask an athlete to do something. You say, I want a low standard and low expectation. Ding, they are able to do it. Fantastic. They have the capacity. You ask them to do high standard, low expectation. Ding, they can do it. They have the capacity. You ask them to do a low standard and a high expectation, they fail. Now the question is, why did they fail? Is it an emotional problem? Is that the reason why they failed? Is it a mental problem? Is that why? Or is it a physical problem? So understanding that failure is not just you failed. The question is, why did you fail? Because now I need to work in one of those capacities. I need to either help you grow emotionally, help you grow mentally, or help you grow physically. So depending on what you're trying to achieve is going to determine where the breakdown is going to happen in the capacity, but you need to understand that so you can work on exercises to improve the capacity. So a high standard, low expectation. You're going to test the capacity essentially using progressionary steps. And the question is then, where does it fall in line with progressions? Is it a ground, flight, special, elite kind of skill? Where does it go? And so, hey, I'm going to test your capacity. I want you to do progressions 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to see where the breakdown is, and then that's going to tell me where you're at. And the progressions are just following a line of, right, easy, medium, difficult, hard skills, and that's just where they fit in the story. So assignment B is do a low standard and a high expectation. I'm testing it. I'm using the progressions to test it, and it falls in line somewhere with the story of skills. All right, so we're always trying to get results, and the key to remember is when getting results is you're going to have to play with the capacity of the athlete in relationship to their ability to recruit their capacity and apply it to the adaptive assignment. So the results we're trying to get are skills, connections, routines, basically saying that skills build into connections, which build into routines. So we're trying to see if they have the capacity for the skill. If they do, then do they have the capacity for connections? And then do they have the capacity to build routines? Along with that, you're going to find that they're also going to need results in direction. Which direction are they traveling? They need to understand these concepts essentially: rhythm, surface tension, shape change, body tension, alignment, timing, awareness. There's more, but these are just some key pointers, and we're going to dive in and talk about these types of results. So measuring the surface. So the question to ask is the surface being used appropriately? So are they moving in the wrong or right direction? Based off of how you use the surface will tell you where your center of mass is going, and if your center of mass is going in the right or wrong direction for the skill is watching the surface. There's a top and or bottom motion of the surface, and what we mean by that is, like, let's think about a trampoline. If the trampoline is nobody's on it, then the trampoline bed is at the top. But if you jump and press down on the trampoline, it's at the bottom. And then as the trampoline bed rises, it goes back to the top. And so there's that distance travel. And so where is the surface? That's the question that needs to be asked. Where do you need to be in relationship to where the surface needs to be? When the trampoline is at the bottom, what position do you need to be in? When the trampoline's at the top, what position do you need to be in? Tension at the lowest point on the surface. This is understanding that the surface needs to push you. So you need to have tension that the surface can actually push you. You don't want to just buckle your knees or relax. So when the surface tries to push you, you just collapse and you don't go anywhere. Riding the surface to the top. This is the timing. Understanding how the surface moves, and then how long are you going to have to ride the surface. Contact and push the surface. So pushing the surface is good versus striking the surface. If you push the surface, you're not going to have that high of impact force, which is why we do a lot of shape change movement, versus if you're striking the surface, there's going to be a lot of impact, and eventually there's going to be more wear and tear on your body. So just understanding, how do I push the surface versus am I striking the surface? So another concept is direction, and that's just basically predicting where you're going. Bad direction basically collapses on itself and becomes a major danger. So you want to just know, okay, look at the skill and see if they're traveling in a direction that the skill should be traveling in, and then can you predict that travel? When they leave the surface, can you predict where they're going to land? And if you can, and it's in a good position of where the skill's going, great. But if you try to predict where it's going and it's not going to go there, that's probably bad direction, and that needs to stop. Rhythm is the athlete and surface move together with intention. So understanding for the athlete how to move with the surface and become one with the surface while they're on the surface with intention. And the intention is, what skill are you doing? What are you trying to do with it? And so be purposeful in how you move the surface. Being in time with the surface is understanding that tension that you're supposed to have and being in sync with it and moving with it so that when the surface reacts, you respond to that reaction. Surface tension, it puts force on the athlete. So it's the result you're trying to get is how much energy is coming off the surface, essentially. So you measure the distance of travel. You say, well, how far did the athlete move? And that's going to let you know how much force went into the surface and how it responded and pushed the athlete. The ability of the surface to move you is really what you're trying to understand. So surface tension, the stiffer the surface, the harder it's going to be to move the surface. The softer the surface, the easier it will be to move. But soft surfaces don't necessarily push back easily. Think of it like a resi mat or soft foam. You can jump on it, but it's not going to push you back the same way. Rotational shape change. So you want to know how, can they rotate in the largest shape possible with the most amount of flips? That's really what you're trying to develop. It's double layouts, essentially, triple layouts. And so if they can, fantastic. But if they can't, how do you get them there? What are you going to start measuring and looking at to help them get to a point where they can actually create the largest shape possible with the most amount of flips? Are they under rotating or over rotating? Under rotation is going to be caused by certain things, certain types of like being rushing the surface, essentially, or not being in sync with the surface, shape changing early. Over rotation, too much power, not enough air awareness, stay in the shape too long. Over rotation, under rotation, both have their dangers. So understanding, does the athlete know where they are, and are they under rotating or over rotating? How do I adjust? Power shape change, athletes' ability to move themselves and the distance covered with shapes. Basically, this is just how do I generate power, linear momentum, angular momentum, and how well is my ability to move my body. And can you look at an athlete and go, wow, they know how to move really well? Or do you look at them and go, wow, they struggle at moving? And then how do you measure those results? And then how do you adjust accordingly to make sure that they're the most successful based off of their capacity to power shape change? Body tension is just your ability to control your center of mass. If you tie a string to, let's say, a door handle, and you hold the string, and say it's a 4 or 5 foot long string, you hold the string really loose and you flick it, it's going to have a little wave kind of going through, but it's going to die pretty quickly. You're not going to see that wave come back as much if you hold it really loose. But if you hold the string really tight, you pull against the door handle and you flick it, then the energy is going to go into the door handle, across the string, into the door handle, and back to you. And you're going to see this wave effect kind of bounce back and forth through the string. So it's understanding the tension is allowing the energy to move through you, but it's also where's your tension in relationship to your center of mass. So as your center of mass is moving, it's also pulling you along. Alignment is basically how do you stack your bones on top of each other? How do you allow that energy to move through you? So you're trying to get perfect alignment. That's ideal. You're never going to have it from the beginning. So it's something that you have to develop over time. So you can't stop learning skills, but you also can't progress skills beyond an athlete's ability to have proper alignment. Otherwise, you're going to start getting closer to causing injury. It connects different parts of the body together. So that's what alignment does, is how do I connect my shoulders to my hips to my feet? Move a joint independently without another joint being pulled. How do I lift my arms without my ribs coming out? How do I pick a leg up without my bottom leg bending? So how do I move without other things being affected? Understand that straight lines are better than bent lines because it allows the surface to push you back. So the more straight you are, the more the surface can push you. Timing, moment of opportunity. It's just basically saying that there's a moment in a skill that you have an opportunity to either add power, shape change, do something. And in that moment of opportunity, you need to be aware of it to do the action that's required in that moment. When you move your body, you need to have awareness of self. So timing is also knowing that when you're doing something, you're aware of yourself in that moment and you can intentionally respond appropriately. So there's a level of awareness. Awareness as a concept is, do you have, correct head positions? So can you put your head in different positions when doing the skill? And if you can, you probably have awareness. If you can't, then you probably struggle with awareness. You should be able to do a front flip looking to the right, looking to the left, looking down, looking up, still while doing the front flip, but with different head positions. It shouldn't throw you off. What does the rhythm look, or does the rhythm look coordinated? So you can look at somebody and go, wow, that person looks coordinated, or they don't. They look like their body is in rhythm, or it is not. And people who have awareness tend to be more in rhythm and look more coordinated through the process. Does their finish look like they have control? Kind of goes with the, do they have a surprise look on their face when they finish? When a person lands a skill, they need to look like they're in control. They don't need to have this shock like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just landed. I survived. And so that's really what you're looking for. What do they see? This goes back, where do they black out? If they don't see anything in a skill, then you don't actually know if they're aware the entire time. And where a person blacks out is going to be usually the spot where you can't give corrections beyond. It's like, if you black out halfway through the skill, I can't really give you any corrections on that second half of the skill. I can only give you corrections on the first half where you have awareness. And so knowing where they black out and then pushing that blackout point further and further through the skill, so that eventually they can make corrections, further along in the skill. That's really the awareness that you're trying to identify. So with this, the recruitment is really the level of care. How much do you care to take your capacity and apply it to the adaptive assignment? And that's what you're going to get. So if they don't care, they could have a massive amount of capacity but not care, and so then they don't apply it to the assignment, and then you don't actually get a result. So you need to understand there's a difference between their capacity, how much they care, and then the adaptive assignment. And you're going to have to help influence people to care, to take their capacity and apply it to the assignment appropriately. Now, in time, you do not want to be, your top performing athletes are not ones that you need to be teaching how to care. They just need to care. But as an athlete is developing, you want to encourage them and motivate them to care more, so that they can reach their full potential by tapping into 100% of their capacity and applying it to the assignment. So that is the art of adaptation, physical, mental, and emotional capacity. You're probably going to have to watch this several times to really grasp it. You're going to have to experiment with it. It is not an easy concept to just kind of run with. Every single human being is different in this capacity of understanding how do they take their capacity, how do they care, and then how do they apply it to the assignment. And people just do it differently because, again, we have different emotional connections, we have different mental connections, and our physicality is just different. So that's the area that's different, how the whole system works together. But how you develop your physicality is the same for everybody. How you develop the mentality is the same, and how you develop your emotional state and being successful, winning mindset is generally the same for everybody. How you care tends to be the same also. There's only a few different ways to learn how to care, but caring basically looks the same for everybody. And then how you accomplish the assignment is going to look the same. But the combination of how all of them are going to come together, that might be unique and different. And so having an appreciation for unraveling each athlete to develop those components. So the art of adaptation, as always, you need to have questions, you need to think, you need to get this into your wiring. If this is not part of your mental state, you're not going to use it. If you don't have an emotional connection to it, it's not going to mean the same. To get you to care about applying this is probably one of the biggest challenges we have as a company. So understanding that you need to care to take your capacity and apply this as the assignment, that's really going to fall on you. And so your ability to become one with the information and embody it is going to really reflect your success in coaching and connecting with the athletes. Is not only just athletes, but also people, and helping them develop to become more autonomous in their learning.